Good morning. Welcome to ClayChat. Today I chat with Trayci Tompkins, and she will be talking through her clay journey, her gallery journey, but also her new life journey that she's embarking on. Welcome, Trayci. It's over to you.
Thank you, Rika, and thank you for having me join you here today. What I wanted to start with is that we all have a story to tell, and the story of how we got from there to here sometimes is a fascinating one. In 3 years' time, I was just making some calculations today, and in 3 years' time, I would have been involved in my art journey for 30 years. I was lucky enough to start life as with no children and no distractions. It's actually become my life and what I do, and I managed to bring my husband into it as well. So the two of us have kind of worked this journey together. So what we thought we'd do is divide this into 4 sections today. The first section will be finding inspiration and my early ceramics, and talking you through the inspirations and how I found a voice as a self-taught potter. Then I'll move into the second section, which is from 2003, the Dlamini figurines and some production ceramics, and the challenges and what the events of those years, which moved us into section 3, which is the gallery, fine art gallery. It started with just the ceramics and an art bar where people could come and paint their own ceramics. And for 10 years, we ran a very successful contemporary gallery, which evolved into a fine art gallery selling other artists up to about, I think that we had about 60 artists we represented in the end. The gallery is still going. We sold the gallery in 2018. And then only recently last year sold our Dlamini business. So that business is now evolving on its own. And I'll take you into where I am now. So 4 sections that I'll pull you through today. Okay. So in the beginning, in 1995, I really had this urge to make pots. I'd taken a course in London when I lived in London with Sudanese potter Mo Abdallah, and he taught me how to coil pots. But as a self-taught artist, I didn't know, first of all, how to actually make pots, what I wanted to say. But having studied drama, I knew that each pot wanted to stand on its own. It wanted to be a character. And so all the work I made were quite large statement hand coiled pots. And I feel like everyone had a story to tell. So I was kind of digging into what attracted, what was important to me and what I wanted to say about my travels. So these 3 raku urns, I made a whole series of urns inspired by my time in Morocco, in Marrakesh and Casablanca. And I would put the pots, I would glaze the pots in such a way that the fire did all the decoration. So for me, the interest was in shape and form, and the fire did all the rest of it. Rika, do you want to move on to the next slide? These are, see, I've got a cursor, I can do it myself, Rika. So these are the Berber pots, inspired by those big water vessels that I saw in Morocco. I kind of combined my love for hunting through fossils in the Transkei coast. I would spend time digging in the shale rocks, looking for fossils. So the effect that I was seeing on those water pots in Morocco, the Berber pots, they had this sort of ancientness to them, and I really wanted that. I like that old feel. So what I did was I used to coil these huge urns, apply a porcelain slip, burnish them with a little stone for hours to get that beautiful, soft surface feel like velvet, and then wrap them in horsehair and seaweed and onion skins, and then put them into a sawdust pit and set them alight. So that 2 days later, the pot would emerge and it would have its own voice. Next slide, Rika. My journeys into Tikal, in the jungles of Tikal with the Olmecs and the Toltecs, absolutely fascinated me. So I'd seen this this jungle in Tikal in a National Geographic when I was a child, and I kind of carried it with me. And so the pots that I was making at the time were very much inspired by those journeys. I came back with the 3-pronged feet with the very soft, beautiful curves of the ancient Olmec pots, ceramic pots, clay pots. And the horses were very much part of my life. I had a big horse that I would ride, gallop through forests, and so it was almost like a I guess a funeral urn for me. These pots were. I'd have to build the kiln up quite large to accommodate the size of the pot, the challenges came then of firing, as the ceramic will know, is firing a pot evenly with a single gas flame. So I would learn techniques of closing the kiln down so as to even off the glaze, and then wrap it in oil. I'd take oily rags and wrap the pot in oily rags at the end once I'd pulled it out the kiln. So there was lots of experimental things that went on then in those days. Part of seeking my voice and what it is that I wanted to make was looking at my environment and the landscape of the Dargle in the Midlands where I lived. And we were filled with farmland and local produce. And it's funny how the sheep and the lambs and of the area there have now influenced my paintings now, where I'm painting all the local goats of Riebeek East, and I'm feeding them all. I've now got a whole bunch of chickens that I feed with spaghetti, and I hold them up and the chickens eat them out my hand. They think it's worms. So these pots were also very much inspired by the landscape of the Dargle, and the way the landscape moved. I only know now that, having studied painting and abstract painting with Louise Fletcher from the UK, I only now understand what I was doing then. At the time, because I'm not trained as an artist and not trained to bring in influences, I actually had no idea how. They call it now Steal Like an Artist, where you look at other artists' work, you dig in deep through journaling as to what is meaningful to you and how you can interpret it into your work. And I think that those were the struggles that I was experiencing at the time of what do I want to say? What is, and I think that only now, looking back, I can see very clearly what I was trying to do. I was getting the curves and the form of the Midlands, the way the land moved, the colors that I was seeing, the way the land was separated into chopped farmland area. And those were very obvious in this series of pots that I did. Also raku-fied. Now, being theatrical and studying drama, a lot of my work was very sculptural and very expressive. So this came through a lot in the clay figurines. I listen a lot to Cirque du Soleil music when I work, and I travel to England every year to watch a Cirque du Soleil performance, which is my ultimate thing. I just love that. So also these figurines and the Dr. Seuss books and the poetry that I write is very much about journeying and about the way we look at life and the lessons that we learn along the way. So a lot of those were where we need to go back a bit.
Sorry, Trayci,
back.
I'm not too sure what's happening here. Apologies. There we go.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so go forward. This series of Renaissance pots were very much influenced. I was looking at my family tree, my family history. I have a great-great-grandfather. His name is Felix Peccioni, and he painted painted friezes behind the altar in Italy and in Ireland. So I need to travel to Ireland to see this work. But so I was then going on this journey of trying to take where I'm at in Africa and on the farmland into this whole Renaissance Italian influence. So this is where we were at with these pots, is exploring shape and form, carving into work. I started doing some lino cut and some lino cut resist workshops. So I was using the lino cut to imprint into the clay and exploring ways of combining carving and lino cut, so the clay was impressed so that you get the clay moving forward, and oxides to highlight those areas where the texture was pressed into the clay. And very much influenced by the architecture. I have another grandfather who was an architect, and I wanted to explore ways with this. I'm fascinated by Leonardo da Vinci and architecture of Italy, and altering the shape and form and constructing pots where it started to be like the handle is hollow. So hollow constructions, very much like the architectural drawings on the right side there. Just go back one, Rika. Yeah. And that then led to the construction of the chairs, which are all hollow. So my favorite thing is I had in my last house on the farm, I think we had 13 couches. And so when we came to move, we had to reduce down to 2. So that was rather fun. But I love drawing chairs, and I love chairs. My mum used to collect chairs, antique chairs. And my dog George is a total couch potato, and it inspired this whole range of dogs on chairs, which was very much about the expression and the storytelling and the narrative of the dog in your home, who's always really almost always the center of attention, and the quirkiness of them. So the dogs, each one of them, became like an expression of humor or expression of something. Like that Great Dane at the bottom, she's got her ear watching out for the person coming home, because she's not meant to be on that fancy chaise lounge. And then it became dog commissions that I was doing, but I was always I always had to meet the dog, always had to know more about its personality. I wanted something more, not just the dog on the chair. And so I think that brings us to the start of 2003. I was making my ceramics, and 2003, we had a gardener by the name of Tim Lamini. And Tim and I used to go up to Garth Hutz's studio to mix our clay. He had a really lovely big clay, a big dough machine that we would sit and make our clay. Because I had to have a specific clay for my pots. I would put them through such extreme heat changes that I had to formulate a clay. So I formulated a clay body, and Tim and I would, it was quite it was a full day affair to make our clay. So him and I would sit around this dough machine, and I said to him one day, Tim, what would you make if I gave you some clay? He says he thinks he'll make a face. So he made me this flat little face. And while we were standing around Garth Hutz's dough machine, I taught him to make a pinch pot, stuff it with newspaper, and make a face that was, with eyes, nose, mouth, which he did. And it was just amazing. It was so filled with expression. And Tim was such a humble guy that I just thought there's something here that we could do that could actually become a second business. I think I'm always entrepreneurial, and I'm always looking for an opportunity that's got meaning and that's got story with it. So that day we came home and I put his little head onto a body, rolled a stick, a sausage of clay on a stick, rolled it out, and it became the body of the Dlamini. And because Tim is a deep thinker, I wanted it to carry a thought on its head. So the product I designed for him was this figurine called the Dlamini. And that's how it looked in the early days. It was Rakufied body, Rakufied figurine. We put it on a base eventually so that it wouldn't topple over. It was secure on people's mantelpieces on their tables. And we designed a box that carried its story. That packaging was really, really fundamental. And it changed so often during the years. And that plate was a full colorway. So at midnight, Stuart and I would go down to Nampak, who was printing our boxes, and we would have to sit by the print machine and actually physically, because it's heavy duty cardboard, and physically line up each box that came off the printer to get that registration correct, because the way it had been designed was to be this really bright, in-your-face, colorful box. But it was, the challenges of that box were quite enormous. But it did launch us into the overseas market because it told the story. And it told the story in not a way that people were telling the story before. There was always this whole thing of looking for support from government funding, and we never pursued that. This was always a business. It was always going to be sustainable, and it was always going to be a business that created employment and was dignified, and it created a voice of a product that was truly South African. So each thought on top of the head was taken from like Tim's thinking. So it was really very much about the artist. Whenever I design something, it's always about the artist and how I teach. I mean, Tim didn't know at the beginning that the waves kept coming. He didn't know an airplane. He thought it was the size of a star. So all the tuition was down on the beach or at the airport, looking at airplanes, at the harbor, looking at boats coming in. Going to game reserves, looking at the way animals moved. We'd started the Dlaminis, and a friend of mine in Pietermaritzburg, I don't know if you remember Di Earle, she had a company called Clay, I think it was Claybright. Was it Claybright? I think she started she started something, not Claybright. She started a clay where they painted on ceramics. And so Albert was her thrower. And when she sold her business, they no longer needed a pottery thrower. So she called me up and said, please could I employ Albert? And I didn't want to become a production potter, I thought. And so I had so much to learn. Overnight, Albert, I employed Albert, but I also employed his wife, who was wedging his clay and helping with the clay recycling. Overnight, I had to learn very quickly how to make production pottery. Fortunately, I was able to buy 2 very large container kilns, which were almost brand new, and all the equipment. I invested hugely in upping the pottery to another level. And with that, we had to employ another 5 people. So now we're up to 10 of us. We also had to move from our premises in Hilton, which we ran from home, into like a factory premises where we could run the 3-phase kilns. We could do all the smoke firing. And it was during that time that I had to learn how to become a very skilled production potter and also learn what products to put into the market. So product design, I had to learn how to measure and size and work with weight and calculate cost, and then providing access to market with these products. So the business then changed, and we couldn't call it Trayci Tompkins Ceramics any longer. We changed the name to Zulululu. So that was when Zulululu was born, is way back in 2003, I think, somewhere around there. So what I wanted products that really spoke of the artists that we employed and really gave us a niche in the market. They were still going to feel like one-off products. I didn't ever want it to feel like it was mass produced. So Albert would throw the pots and then all of us would add on. So the face bowl range was born, and that was a spill-off from the Dlamini. So the Dlamini was still being produced. The face bowls were being produced. We then introduced some smoke. Is there a next slide there, Rika? Yeah, so then we introduced a smoke-fired decor range, which is the smoke-fired pots, the smoke-fired Okamba. Originally, I was coiling those pots, and then we designed the shape for Albert to throw. Bear in mind, every thrower has their hands move in a different way. So my design had to be sized, had to be drawn up. So each product I would draw into a folder became our little Bible. So each one I designed as to what width it wanted to be on the outside edge, what the lip wanted to look like, because it's very important to me how the lip ends, and Albert's hands moved in a different way. So he had to learn a different way as to how to move his hands, and I had to learn a different way as to how Albert's hands moved, and somewhere in the middle, the product met and became what it was. So the little salt men, he would throw, we would then assemble. So he'd throw the body, the little bowls, and then we'd hand make the hands and the head. The little sugar bowls, the little bird was handmade. The marbling, I brought in a marble artist and taught her how to marble onto ceramic. And together we launched this range where so it became sustainable for her. She, whatever, I would throw the pots, bisque fire them, take them to her, give her the underglazes and all the things she needed to marble with, pay her upfront for the range, and then she would bring it back and I would glaze it. So all these products became Zulululu Ceramics, which was a very exciting time. We learned so much. We had everything from raku firing to electric firing to smoke firing. And within the electric firing was also stoneware and earthenware. So there was lots going on. It was a very, very, very busy time. But because now we've got so many artists working, full-time employed, we had to develop products. So that Dlamini had to expand. Some of the girls who worked, I found, and Nana was in the spa. She's a lovely tall girl. So I taught her to design this angel for her, which is the bottom left and bottom right. She's then Tombi Angel. and her face is so nana. It was beautiful to see how every artist had a different face, and every face was different. Everyone became a collectible. I didn't want them to be, I wanted it still to be a handmade product. And with that becomes another issue of costing, packaging. Go back, Rika. Yeah. So designing product for artists and keeping your costs down as well, which is really important, because if you're selling it on to a gallery, you're sending it overseas, you're selling at a wholesale rate. Okay, Rika. So packaging then became a big issue. How do you get your ceramic product overseas? How do you send it without it breaking? The challenges of getting work to be transported across a country, across the seas. Also, packaging creates opportunities that you can now sell to corporate clients, where they can add their personal element on. So we did a lot of corporate deals where the head of the Dlamini, the thought of the Dlamini, became something to do with like a corporate. So it was a fax machine for Nashua, or a photostat machine, or the graduates of companies had graduate hats on. It was just amazing. We had such fun in those days with that product. And Tim had to learn new ways of seeing things in 3 dimension as well to hand make each one. During lockdown, we discovered that, well, during lockdown, there was no business. There was no business coming through the gallery. So we had to really think on our feet. So over WhatsApp, I designed this new angel and sent the dimensions and the design to Tim. I handmade all the little wings, and he had to scale down his angel face to a smaller angel. We then had to get Tim Buthelezi drive across Sweetwaters in the dark, because no one was supposed to be moving around. Just at nightfall was the best time, or early in the morning, to go and pick up the faces from Tim Dlamini, take them across to his studio, and attach them onto the bodies and put the arms on. And then over SMS to our packaging company, develop this tube, which we could then package the angel into the tube and courier. Once the courier's opened, we could courier these across the country. We then marketed them overseas to people in the UK with family here in South Africa, to say, here's an angel to send to your family with an individual note, which I'd hand write. And then Stuart and I would jump in the car and hand deliver as soon as lockdown for us was over, and we could drive and get around. We could hand deliver these little angels, and that's what got us through lockdown, is these little angels providing employment still for Tim and Tim. Those then developed with little, there was a wire guy. And I just wanted to show you is how working in collaboration with other artists also helps your product. This was a little wire guy in Maryvale that we got to make little proteas that sat in the front of the Dlamini, and that was part of our little gifting that we then launched during COVID. And those are our Dlaminis that are all over the world. So we sold the Dlamini business just recently in 2000 and where are we now? 2022. So 2021, we've just sold the Dlamini business. The guys started working from home. We set them up at home in their own studios at their home in Sweetwaters, which is just outside of Hilton. So that business is now, will continue under the guidance of Sue Ackerman, who has taken it on. I wanted to say that ceramic business, with the functional pottery, we actually had to close down. When we moved into our gallery, I'll tell you the story later on, but we did have to close that business down. There was just too high electricity costs were stifling us, and cheaper imports that were coming in. It was just not sustainable any longer. So it's quite a lovely thing that we've been able to sustain this Lamini story and keep it going. And I think that the reason that that's happened is it didn't become a commercial thing. There was still this very much hands-on, artistic African feel to it. Thanks, Rika. Okay, which brings us to our third section, which is the gallery. We never actually started in this lovely, fancy, posh gallery. We actually started, our first gallery was in a Wendy house around the corner from this fancy, posh building. So when I had the ceramic business with the functional pottery and the Laminis, Stuart and I realized that doing the trade shows up in Johannesburg was just getting too costly for us. There was also too much cheaper imports coming in, and a beautiful ceramic teapot that people were buying for 50 Rand. We just could not replicate that with the style. And we did not want to compromise and make cheaper things. We wanted our work to still have the voice of Zulululu. So we decided to open our own shop. And that in itself is a journey. Our first shop was in a Wendy house. And every time people walked into the Wendy house, which was alongside a coffee shop, but it was a fantastic location, all the ceramics would jingle, jingle, jingle because the floor was uneven. So all the ceramics would jingle on the shelves, and people were too nervous to buy them because they sounded very fragile. So we managed to fund the first building, which is in a little thatch building, and then eventually, and we had a gallery at home, which didn't work. So we tested it out. People wouldn't come. And it was just around the corner from here, and people wouldn't come. For those of you who live in KZN, this is in a center of shops that's called Piggly Wiggly. It's on the Midlands Meander, so the location was perfect. I designed this building as an H shape, but we used the front section there with the big windows is how the gallery ended up. Originally it had a courtyard in there. There was an art bar where people could come and paint ceramics. There was a whole ceramic boutique in the whole back building, and then a fine art gallery coming up the other wing. After a number of years, once we closed the ceramic business, we then went to source other ceramic artists to represent them in KZN. So it became a ceramic and fine art gallery. And that's when I went out and found artists' work to represent. And I had to actively go and do that. I had to go to Johannesburg. Colleen was amazing. She set up meetings for me where I could go and talk to the potters up in Johannesburg. We had an agent up there who we pay a commission to help us source the work. It was all on consignment. The potters were amazing. The artists were amazing. I built up relationships, obviously, over the previous 20 years of exhibiting myself with everyone. So we had those relationships all intact, and which meant also that we had to now employ bookkeepers. We had to change our business structure. It meant we had to then invest a huge amount of money in the display, in lighting it correctly, and getting the right artists into the gallery so that we create a world-class gallery in the Midlands, which is something really important to us, is how to display the work. I think the display of anything, especially ceramics and of paintings, is putting the stories together, making it look desirable, making people want to own it. It's all very well having a gallery, but if nothing sells, you may as well close the door. So it required a huge amount of work. I would go in at night and clean all the shelves when the people weren't there, polish all the furniture, make sure every ceramic was put in the right place, that it was well lit, that it was at the right height, that it, it could be shown off to the best of its, to be given the artist the right respect for their work. And also combining the kind of work together so that everything just flowed, everything worked well. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we want people to feel like it would fit in their home. So the gallery it was quite good to have the 3-dimension against the paintings. And the paintings as well was providing people with a work that I loved. I think it's really important that if you're a gallery owner, you love the work that you have there, because then it's easier to sell it. In the early days, we had to employ the right staff, which was difficult because there's some days in a center like that where you have often 0 sales and often no one walks in the gallery. So there's the boredom factor of someone working there. It's all very well having a really expensive person to run the gallery, but how are you going to pay them if there's no customers coming in on those days? So those were very tough times. We had to ride it through. A huge investment from ourselves, borrowing money to make this work for everybody. But we were totally committed and totally invested in this gallery. And everything we did, we made sure that the work was so well displayed and so well presented. Those front glass windows that we put in, we actually enclosed the courtyard because I needed window display. When I worked there, I realized people weren't coming in because they couldn't see what was inside the shop. So it was a massive learning curve. Every time I traveled, I would actually be traveling to London, not to see the sights of London, but to see what was going on in retail, how galleries were displaying work, how shops were displaying work, what they were doing with their packaging, how they were promoting it, how they were putting things together, what were the colors of the day, what were the interiors looking like. It became all consuming. I had to actually focus on all of those things to be able to put this gallery together. As things change and as things evolved with social media and with how you promote, because you can have a beautiful gallery, but if no one comes, or you're just relying on foot traffic of that area, I needed to up my social media skills. So not only concerning ourselves with packaging of how to get these beautiful big pots. I mean, we sent a lot of Michelle's pots abroad, and a lot of the ceramics, delicate ceramics across to Australia, New Zealand, was to how to promote it on social media. So what I would do is I would use the shops within our center to have the work. There's another slide there, Rika. Yeah, this one. Is take the work and put it into a home environment. So I would use the shops at Piggly Wiggly to to stage a setting and just photograph it on my little iPhone, and then use that for Instagram and that for Facebook and this is something that any artist can do, is to actually put their art in a home environment setting and then tag their company. So I would tag, in this case, Homewood, so that their clients who are following them on Instagram would then see our ceramics or our art, and then hopefully follow us, or hopefully like an entry level into our world. So those were all the little tricks and things that I had to then come up with on social media. So I would do all sorts. I would go into the restaurant, I would do settings of people's ceramics with food, food and coffee and all sorts of things, and then promote our Instagram pages that way, using the work from the gallery to promote everybody's ceramics and come up with stories and come up with themes and come up with ideas of how to promote the work outside of the gallery. Okay, this brings us to section number 3. No, section number 4 of my change from ceramic into painting. And I think it really happened when I was working in the gallery. Just before COVID, a year before COVID, we sold the gallery, like about 6 months before COVID hit. Prior to that, both Stuart and I were working in the gallery. Times were really tough. We had to actually really maximize the amount of time that we spent in there so that we could talk to potential clients about work. And it really helped because we got some fantastic, we deliver work up to Namibia. We'd sell the work on the Sunday, rent a trailer on the Monday, and on the Tuesday be in Botswana delivering the work, or in Namibia delivering one of those large wooden sculptures that were outside the gallery. We had to be available for that. And I think that's the reason why we survived, was to actually be there ourselves. But it took its toll as well, because now suddenly I wasn't able to make ceramics because I wasn't in a big pottery studio. I'd had a little satellite studio on the side of the gallery, but I was also busy with the art bar, firing other people's work that were coming in to paint on weekends. So my time I was really stretched. So while I was in the gallery working, I would be painting as well. And the painting came from what I was doing on these pots, where I was painting portraits in clay. So all the portraits I would paint, and I think there was also a frustration level, because I would paint these portraits in clay slip and then put them into the firing, into stoneware to make the pot strong. But then the clay would burn away, all the colors would burn away. I'd managed to hold on to, a lot of the strong contrasts of color, but I was losing a lot of the subtlety. And I think that was a frustration for me. I wanted to put it onto a canvas, but I didn't know how to paint. So I was kind of teaching myself, like the blue face wasn't that blue. It was more of a subtle blue. And I think that I wanted to explore the painting more. But I loved those times. It was a lovely combination. I'd actually even photographed these clay portraits onto fabric. So we made a cushion range as well with these. There's still carving and using lino cut and using all those technical skills that I was doing earlier on. But those were the last pots. And then I was still making the dogs. So what I did was, once we sold the gallery, I went back to my studio, built a beautiful studio with fountains and out onto a courtyard and lots of light. And it was so beautiful, and was able to then focus on making these dogs on chairs. And that became the sculpture. And I sort of scaled it down to these intimate pieces where I'd spend a lot of time on them, constructing the hollow chairs, working on the patterns, working on the dogs that worked with the chair. Did some commissions for people. And I think that's when I started taking a course with abstract artist Louise Fletcher, who really cemented in me this whole thing of narrative. What is it that I want to say? How do I want to bring it into my ceramics and into my painting? And letting go of, in ceramics, I felt like I was very tight. I felt like the carving that I did and the way that I illustrated was so tight. I wanted a freedom of expression, and I didn't know how to access this. And so her courses taught me how to really let go and use color, use a sense of expression in another way. So I started to get quite creative with oxide, and with just maybe stretching things a little bit more than I had done before. And I think that that was, for me, where these sculptures were coming in, is this very much taking away that tightness of putting on the costumes and dressing the characters, and they became more about a feeling and an art of expression. So that then led into the paintings. From that led into this working with ink, working with throwing ink down and seeing what happened. And occasionally a face would come. So I'd build the portraits originally from either an ink splodge or a swish of a paint, and just build the work intuitively. Thanks, Rika. And working with collage and working with layering. So what I would do then is bring those lino cuts that I was working with in clay into the backgrounds, into the texture of painting, and learning to work with materials, learning to work with how paint moved, learning to get a feeling into work that I hadn't been able to do with ceramics. I guess I had in a sort of three-dimensional way, but this was now flat. And I'm still learning. I've only been on this painting journey for 3 years. I'm learning how to put color alongside each other, how to work texture, how to express myself in a way that, because painting is a completely different thing now. You know, with ceramics, you're dealing with not only the technical side, but you're also dealing with a three-dimensional form that then has to survive a kiln firing. I think here it can be a lot more playful. So telling those stories have come back to me, telling the stories of the jester comes through from ceramic days, bringing in the landscape with that Intlazan mountain in the background of the work. Playing with the stories of Bluebird, the stories of my horses, which originally you saw in the ceramic pots, and the horsehair and the handles being horses riding through the forest, and the story of every man. During COVID, I pulled out some of my father's books of when he was a scout and he traveled through the Dargle, scouting the land on his own. And I think that's very much for me, this journey of discovery for me has very much been a lone journey. And I haven't had anyone to hold my hand or guide me. And I remember reading that if the path ahead is nice and clear, it ain't your path. And I think that's so true. I think we all faced with the forest, and it's whichever road we make for ourselves, and give us the confidence to stand up and be proud and be vulnerable and show parts of ourselves. I think as an artist, that's our responsibility, is to show these parts of ourselves and to enjoy the journey along the way, and to celebrate it. Because we inside of us, we contain a whole world, don't we? We're sum total of the experiences we've had and the journeys that we're going to take. And I think this is probably what comes through in what I do. Right, so this is where we are now. Last year we sold our property. We sold our beautiful home, because we knew it was time. We just felt that, Stuart and I felt that, would we stay there forever? Would we move on? What would we do? So we decided to move on. During the insurrection of KZN, when we were out protecting our farmlands, we signed the papers to our property. It was a long process, but we signed it on the Tuesday after that terrible insurrection in KZN. And we packed our bags. We had a month to get out. We had 3 houses on that property. We had staff we needed to build houses for. We had to sell the Dlamini business. We had to do all these things. We had to wrap up my studio. We had to give away so much. And we moved to this little town in the middle of nowhere as a stopgap. It's a little town called Riebeek East. It's in the Eastern Cape, just outside of Grahamstown. We knew one person here. And I came here to heal. I came here to feel. I was so disappointed in what was going on in KZN that I didn't want to leave Africa with that feeling in my heart. I wanted to leave with something of Africa. So it's really weird that Piet Retief moved from this little town back in the day in the 1800s up to Pietermaritzburg, where I'd come from, and that's where he was murdered by Dingaan. This little town of Riebeek East has nothing. It's got one tiny little shop that sells 1 onion, 1 tomato, a couple of chips, a couple of Cokes, and some long life milk, and that's about it. It has 1 bottle store, which is thriving, as you can imagine, in a small town. And it has a church, and it has a church hall, and it has a clinic, and that's about it. And it has a whole bunch of people who are in a place where not much happens. When I Googled Riebeek East, when I first moved here, Google told me nothing happens. A couple of months ago, a girl by the name of Yulundi received funding to start a project called the Hands-On Project. And it's about recycling, and it's about giving the people something in this community in the form of water, because for 10 years there's been drought here. So the idea was to build 2 benches in the town of Riebeek East, one opposite the school and one just outside the primary school, for the children to rest in under the shade, to gather, to wait for their transport, and for the water on the top of the shelter to collect into the JoJo tank that sits beside the bench, so they've got drinking water. So part of this hands-on project was to bring the children of the community in and let them experience clay. This is the finished bench. We started the project with them. My question to them was, what do you like most about Riebeek East? And they all looked at me. By the end of this project, they were, excuse my French, but Riebeek East before. Everything in this community has changed through this clay project and mosaic project and recycling project, where we're upcycling plastic bottles to build those benches, which we've got a sustainability expert, Pierre, who lives in our village now, who has driven that project. So the clay, what I did was I found a room which has no electricity. It has a roof falling in, but it's a room, and we can lock the door. And we moved my slab roller in there. We used thorns that we pulled from the thorn bushes outside. We tore up cardboard boxes for the plates for them to work on. We used texture that we found lying on the floor. And we made a clay project for 20 children to make the little discs, these little discs out of, which was their animals that we went out and looked at, spiders and butterflies and things, and texture to push into the clay to cut out clay hands, which would then represent the community and this celebration of personality, of who you are and what you are about, and the love that we share for each other. That's the next slide there, Rika. So in this little room, I used paper I didn't have a blackboard, so I used A4 pages that we'd stuck together and taught them about drawing and about texture and patterning, and so we were one class there was no English spoken. This class was an English speaking class that was slightly older. The little ones, we just spoke through hand language, big eyes and lots of expression. And it's now grown into something that I want to continue. The project is almost over. We had a launch party last week where the chief of police stood up and said, what this has done for the community is far more than building a bench and seeing a project start and finish, which they don't often see. It was more about going to, before I leave in July, I've had meetings with 2 other people who were involved in this project, and we're going to set up a outreach project where we'll be teaching them to paint, teaching them to mix color, teaching them to draw, and setting up something that can be sustainable for these children. So we'll just see where that goes. And yeah, that's where we're at.
Yes, there we get to the end of the show. Trayci, I don't know where to begin. I've got so many questions, but what I'll do is let's open the floor for anybody else wanting to ask questions first. Shall I start?
I've put them all to sleep now.
No, we just stand in awe of all the projects that you've touched and how it's grown into a business that you leave behind, something that can continue. And I think that is amazing. You know, it's a legacy at the end of the day that the minis will live on forever.
Yeah.
Your project at Lubeck East. Maybe you can tell them about the bicycle project that started off.
So I think how this project started was, it started off as a bicycle project. During the insurrection in KZN, when a lot of the bicycles were stolen from all the stores in KZN, the Rotary became involved in taking back a lot of those bicycles from the police. And they brought those bicycles down to Eastern Cape. And what Yolandi did not want to do, she didn't want to just take those bicycles and just give them into another community, because that wasn't that's not part of the plan. That in itself would be wrong. So what she decided to do was to create this project around the bicycles, where the children, it was like a bicycle library. So the children would then collect rubbish and bring it to the classroom and then stuff the bottles with the plastic. So that we create these eco bricks. The eco bricks would then go into making the bench. And that would buy them time on the bicycle. So whenever they stuffed a bottle for 20 minutes, they would then be able to ride the bicycle for the day. So that became like their bicycle project. And that was the start of it all. So the whole thing has had a knock-on effect all along the line. And I think this project that I want to do is now very much about personal identity. And it's a spill-off of what we talk about in our art tribe with Louise, is that accessing, say, with your work, who you are as a person. I think it can start at a younger age. I think we don't need to wait till we're 50 or 60 to find our voice. I think we can find it at a very early age. And it can help us be better humans in a project like this, where we work together. So yeah, that's really my aim for it.
And that's the upliftment part that's, you know, part of your projects all through. There's a line of upliftment, education, transferring of skills and knowledge. And I think that is amazing.
Yeah. I think it's really important. I think we can, as artists, we can go through life being very closed. We can go through life thinking that we've got to hold on to these secrets, that, you know, our recipes are for us alone. And I think life is too short for that. I think that it's like anything, the more it's a full circle, the more you give away, the more it comes back at you. I think it's really important. I think that as humanity, we need each other. We need to be able to work together. We need to grow together. And, you know, we support each other. I think that that's the most important thing, is to see each other thrive is, for me, such a joyful thing. The more I can help other artists and the more I can help everyone else shine, is, you know, that makes me shine inside. So yeah, these projects are very much about that. And I think at the time I didn't realize it. Only looking back at it, do I see that thread that you see. And I'm so grateful to have been able to do that. And I think that was my gift for not having children and not having that life of, I mean, I got sick at a very early age. I got sick in my 20s, and that's why I became a potter, because I had to give up my job. I was lying on the floor under the sink trying to feel alive. And I've had to deal with an autoimmune all my life. So this is my way of actually kicking it in the butt and saying, that's not going to define me. This is what will define me.
Absolutely. No, your enthusiasm is it's amazing, and I love that. I want to go back on your ceramic journey, making ceramics yourself, and then also as a gallery owner displaying it. What was an important factor for you looking at ceramics? What, from a gallery owner point of view, what were you looking at? What are the pointers for ceramicists to look at?
First of all, I think in any art, your work has to be different. It has to speak of you. It has to have your personality. For somebody to want to own your work, it has, I think there's got to be something special about it. If I'm looking to, if someone is submitting work, for example, to a gallery, each gallery has its own look and feel. And if you're submitting work to Gallery A, it might not be the right gallery for you. Gallery B or Gallery C might be the better place for you. So I think as an artist, you need to, first of all, know where you're putting your work and really dive into that. Not just blanket go out and put your work, try to get your work in everywhere. You've got to know who is your target market, who you're selling to. I think with anything, it's like if you were a fashion designer and you're designing plus sizes, you're not going to go market it to anorexics. You're going to market to your plus sizes, and you're going to streamline it there. Sorry, it's a bad example, but you know, just the extreme of it. I think it's really important. And I think that also must show in your pricing. If you're marketing to who you're marketing to, what are they looking for? Understand your target market first. Because if we're making work to sell, you really have to know who you're selling to. Spend your time researching that. And I think as a gallery, if you're a good gallerist will know who their target market is, who they're selling to, what is their look and feel that they're after. And often we would, if the artist wanted it, you know, we would always give feedback on the work as to, let's try it. I'm going to try this, but my feeling is, okay, it's overpriced or it's underpriced, or I'm going to have to slot it in because I like the work. I'm going to slot it in this way, and this is how I'm going to market it. So the gallery will market each thing differently. And so not everybody's cut out to run a gallery, because you have to actually know how to sell other people's work. You have to know how to display it. And, you know, it's all very well paying a rental, opening your doors, getting all this work in on consignment. But there's more to it than that. There's good business practice that happens along the way as well. So to answer your question of how would I look at choosing work, I think for me it would be, it's so varied, there's no one formula, but I think I would see something in the work. If there was work that I knew had maybe a quirkiness about it that I could sell, or it would fit in with what I was displaying at the time, or what my customers were looking for. But also I'm not closed off to the fact of bringing something new in and trying it out. But then the artist would know, I'm trying this out. But yeah, I think for me, it was very much about my own look and feel of what I was after for that gallery. So we'd have to turn a lot of people down. And I think the ones we turned down were the ones who had come in with a cell phone and put it under my nose and start showing me their pictures. That is like the worst thing you can do as an artist, is to come into a gallery with your cell phone and start saying, you know, I make pots here, I paint, here's my paintings, here's my pots. Do it professionally. And also, as an artist, it's really important to follow up with your galleries. You know, you can't just put your work there and not follow it through. Nowadays, you have to work hand in hand. You have to, whatever social media you're doing, link it back to your gallery. Keep your pricing consistent. Don't undercut the gallery. If you're getting a sale that's coming, because this happens a lot, and this is the demise of galleries. And I think that's the thing, is if we need galleries in our society, galleries who are exhibiting our work and showcasing our work, we need to work with them. So and this is happening a lot, is our clients are coming into the gallery, and I'd see it so often, and in front of me, they would say, oh, let's just look up this person on Google and go through their website and go buy it directly from them because it's listed there, or I'll get them to paint something similar, or I'll get them to make something similar. And I think that's really important. Just if you're going to go into a gallery as a committed artist. Otherwise, don't go to a gallery, rather sell it yourself and market it yourself. Make that decision if you're an artist, and be professional. Be loyal and be professional. Yeah. Absolutely. Because that's the way the gallery is going to back you as well. You know, we had plenty of this. We've had plenty of people coming in, displaying their work, good artists too, displaying their work. I know they've sold it separately, apart from the gallery, coming in and swapping the work over and then taking that work and selling it to the person. And it happens often. And so as a gallery, you then ask the artist to kindly remove their work. And it's not nice. That's the part of business which is not nice. Those are the
unpleasant part. Let's talk about clay. So you are not currently working anything in clay for yourself?
Currently, I have no kiln. I have no studio. I've wrapped up my studio on the church hall stage. And I don't know where my future is with anything, with clay. The only project I'm doing is this project that I'm setting up now, where there is a clay source here in Riebeek East. It's at the top of the hill. And next week we'll go with the children to the top of the hill and dig that clay and see how we can use it. There is an old kiln, but it was moved. And so all the bricks have shifted and it's in not a good state. So we're going to have to find a kiln, a single phase kiln. So I'm going to start appealing. If anyone has a single phase kiln, there is no money in this